always keep it real with the Rare Beauty videos. I mean, any video that I make, but especially Rare Beauty. A lot of people think this brand can do no wrong. I think they have a lot of great products. I don't think every product is worth it though. So I always like to really thoroughly test their new launches so you know if it's worth the money or not. A lot of questions I have with this: is the shade gonna be too dark for fair skin? Is it gonna hold up and not crease? Is it gonna control oil? And will it be a good touch-up powder? All those questions will be answered in this video. If you're new to my channel, I'm Lindsay. I make a lot of makeup videos focusing on what's good for pale skin, cool tones, just being really critical about new makeup so you don't end up wasting your money like I did on a lot of makeup. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, let's get started with testing this new Rare Beauty powder. First off, I do already have my base on, which consists of this INNBEAUTY SPF and the About Face foundation. I will link them below. Familiar heavily with both of those products, so I will be able to tell the difference between how the powder is performing and the foundations. First, I do want to put on some concealer because this does claim to be able to be an under eye setting powder as well. I guess let's start with the packaging. This is called the True to Myself Tinted Press Finishing Powder, the shade Porcelain, which is the lightest shade. It says it's an airy, long-lasting pressed powder that instantly blurs, mattifies, and touches up makeup with light, flexible coverage that always looks like skin. Classic packaging. And then the shape of this powder is quite unique. It has this flat top, which gives you a really nice grip on it. That's one thing I do enjoy about Rare Beauty, is the emphasis and focus that they put on their packaging being more accessible and easy to use for people who do have grip problems or just shaky hands like I do because of my chronic illness. So this has a really nice flat top, so it is actually easier to open. So it's this little half moon shape and you get the powder here. My first concern with this was this going to be too dark, or is it going to be too dark on fair skin? Because it is very clearly darker and more yellow than my skin tone. Because this is a half moon sort of shape, it's 0.28 ounces. I'm interested to compare that to a regular pressed powder. This is the Bare Minerals Mineral Veil, which is 0.3 ounces. So it's not quite that much less than a regular circular pressed powder, so I like that they, you know, didn't skimp out on the product just because it has a different shape. It says that you can use this to set a tinted moisturizer on bare skin, over foundation, and under the eyes. Quickly to explain the difference between a finishing powder and a setting powder. Usually setting powders are a little bit more thin. They tend to be more commonly in loose formats, and they don't usually have like silicones in them. They're just meant to set down your makeup and lock it in, whereas finishing powders can have a little bit of coverage like this one does. Has that silicone in there. There's no talc, so it's really meant as like a smoothing finish to the skin to give you like a nice skin like it mentions natural finish, versus setting powders that can make you look a little bit more flat. Also, they're more commonly used as touch-up powders as well. So keeping all those things in mind, we'll see how this ends up wearing throughout the day. It is very hot and I'm going to be very active, so we're going to thoroughly test this. For concealer, I have my Haus Labs concealer, Fair Golden, also another product I'm very familiar with. I use this concealer for every powder that I test because I'm just really familiar with how it wears. I'm gonna go ahead and blend that out with a sponge. Now, I would not typically use a pressed powder for under my eyes. I find most of them do not work for me. They just don't have enough setting powder, but because it's claiming that, we will test it out. I'm also gonna throw on some of their bronzer stick to see how it works with another one of their products. This is the shade Happy Soul. I do really love this bronzer stick. A little bit warm for me, but I would say this is one of my favorite Rare Beauty products. I only need a little bit because it can be quite pigmented. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and blend this out. This is a really creamy formula, so I'm just really interested to see how it sets down and performs with a cream, especially one from the same line. For makeup brands, I do expect all the products to work together. That's just kind of like my thinking. Like, it would be a little weird to make something that doesn't work with another one of your products, but you know, not every makeup brand kind of thinks like that. So I always like to test something that they make when I'm testing a new product from them. Before I go in with the powder, I like to always smooth out my under eyes and pick up any excess product and just other areas that can get cakey. One of my favorite tricks, it just helps everything look a lot smoother in the long run and gives it the best chance of performing. I'm really intrigued to see if this does darken my under eyes. When it's swatched, it really doesn't seem as dark as it looks, but that can change once you put it over a wet concealer. So I'm gonna take a Real Techniques setting brush and I'm gonna get a little bit of the product onto here. They do sell a powder brush for this and a flat puff, which they recommend for more coverage, but for under the eyes, I always like to go in with this brush. So now I'm just going to start by pressing that in. Oh yeah, it's not changing too much. I think that actually looks quite nice. It really didn't darken too much. It kind of just looks like I set it down with a powder, maybe added like a slight tint to it, a slight more coverage, but I think it looks really smooth. I'm gonna take that same brush and just press it onto the sides of the nose, and the areas that get more cakey, I like to use a smaller brush just to lay it nice and smooth. Let's just do one half of the face here and we will compare. Now moving into a fluffier brush, I'm gonna set the rest of my face. So here's the difference. This is the side set with the powder and here's the non-set side. As someone who really doesn't use pressed powders very often, this looks beautiful. It is very smoothing. By the way, there doesn't seem to be any really visible shimmer in here. It's not one of those shimmery powders. It did not enhance my texture. It claims to be more of a smoothing finishing powder, and I think so far it's definitely like giving me that effect. Feels weightless. I kind of like built it up a little bit and it still doesn't really feel like I have a ton of powder on. So really interested to see if it does hold up throughout the day. So this under eye, my left side actually creases a lot more than this side because of the way my like face crinkles. Let me know, do you have a side of your face or under eye that like creases more than the other? Because I definitely do. Just doing that same exact process over here. I do have a little bit of dry skin under this eye. It doesn't look too bad compared to other powders. Let's go ahead and actually try this powder on a puff. It said you could get more coverage when you apply it this way. Oh, okay, I'm definitely seeing a lot more of the pigment. It's showing up a little bit darker than with the fluffy brush. So if you're concerned about the shade being too dark, I would say stay away from the puff because it just applies it more heavily. Yeah, I can definitely tell that boosted my coverage over here a little bit, but I actually really like how that looks. It's super smooth, but like I mentioned about the shade, just avoid doing that if you don't want too much. Yeah, it gave me more of a mattifying smoothing effect. This side still looks like a little bit glowy. Not glowy, I would say. It's just more satin than over here. And let's go ahead and set the nose. I feel like the nose like really will tell all. Usually have dry skin there and a lot of texture, so if a powder accentuates those things, it's very obvious. Let's see. Ooh, that looks really smooth. I was going into this review expecting this shade to be too dark and not work for me. Surprisingly, it works well. It looks a lot darker in the pan than it's applying on my face. With that being said, if you are any lighter than me, I do sort of have like my summer base color going, which isn't really a tan, but I'm slightly darker than I am in the winter. If you're lighter than me, I just wish they maybe made like 1 or 2 lighter shades than this, because I think if you are more fair, this could just deepen your foundation a little bit. So that's just my one critique of it so far. Other than that, I think it actually looks stunning. Like it's so smooth on the skin. Went really nicely with that foundation and set down the cream bronzer. But even though it looks nice and all now, the real test is going to be how it wears throughout the day. Also try touching up with it in the middle of the day. My upper lip's already sweaty. But yeah, let's go ahead and start the wear test now. Don't know what time it is. Let me check. It's 1:41. I will wear this for the rest of the day. Let's finish up the rest of my makeup first. This is RMS Beauty Blush. It's actually a new shade that I have. You know I love French Rosé. This is Bermuda Rose, which looks a little bit more purpley. Haven't really tried this on yet, so I'm super excited. I'm gonna get a little Flower Beauty blush brush and see how this applies. Ooh, this is really pretty. Not sure how different it is to the French Rosé shade. Maybe I'll do a side-by-side swatch. I think it's a little bit more purple. I love how both these are. Here's the comparison. This is French Rose, which is a lot lighter. Not a lot lighter, it's actually a really similar tone. And then this one over here is Bermuda Rose, which has a little bit more depth and slightly more purple. I love both of these though, super pretty shades. I also have this new Laura Geller blush I bought from Prime Day. It's their Baked Blush-N-Brighten Ethereal Rose. I really wanted to try this because it's so freaking light. It's barely even a blush, but for fair skin, I'm like, hell yes. So this, it has like a slight tint to it. I mean, you can't even see that. It's basically like a highlighter, but if you are as fair as me, it does give you a little bit of color as well. So would not recommend if you're any deeper than me, if you want an actual blush and not a highlight. But if you're my skin tone, I think it's a really pretty like blushy highlight hybrid. And I think it looks super pretty on the nose and gives you like a really glowy finish. Before I finish the rest of my makeup, ignore the mascara smudges. As my just like phase has moved around, my under eyes, especially this one that I told you just has more fine lines, it's really creased up. Like the powder just didn't have enough setting power to really set down my concealer and prevent it from moving. This side isn't as bad. There's still a little bit of settling. I'm honestly not surprised by this because I did mention like finishing powders for me, pressed powders under the eyes, they just don't have the properties that I need for my skin. Doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad powder, but if you have more creasy under eyes and more fine lines, I would just not advise this for under the eyes. All over the face, it is still looking quite nice. So because it is just already so creased up, I'm gonna go in with another powder and set it even further just so my makeup doesn't look crazy. But usually with these kinds of finishing powders that have that silicone in them, they tend to just move around on your under eyes more than a non-dimethicone powder would. I'm gonna take my Haley's Beauty one and I'm actually gonna try to smooth it out a little bit more. It kind of just like became one consistency with my concealer instead of setting it down. For a setting powder, I wanted to lay on top and prevent it from moving, not really become one with your skin, which isn't necessarily a bad thing for the face. It's actually usually really natural and nice looking, but not what I'm looking for the under eyes. Okay, that is already so much better. Do a little lip combo, shall we? ColourPop Cool BFF. No surprise here. And then I have this RMS. This is one of their lip balms. They're unscented, unflavored. Really like this one called Passion Lane. Actually pretty pigmented. There's a little bit of shimmer in it. It's just like the perfect everyday lip and it doesn't pull warm. So amazing. It's not really pretty. I just tried this, but like instant favorite. And then I have this. I don't know how to pronounce this brand. I really wish that I did. I'll have to look it up. This is their lip treatment oils in the shade Bliss. I thought this might be too warm, but I love this formula and I love the shade. It is one of those like really thick type of like lip gloss balmy formulas. It's so good. It just feels like instant like cushion on your lips and it has a really nice shine, but it stays for a great amount of time. So this, another new favorite. Do a little extra close-up so you can see how everything is looking. I think it looks quite nice besides the little under eye mishap that we had. Looks nice and smooth. Slight settling my smile lines, but that happens with pretty much any powder I put on this foundation, so not gonna dock it immediately. I'm gonna go ahead and keep wearing this and see how it holds up. All right, it's the next day. I'm back and ready to give you my full thoughts on this powder. I'm going to go ahead and add in the clip of what this was looking like at the end of the night. Also did a little touch up with it. And I will say this did layer really nicely. It wore nicely throughout the day. Started to get a little bit cakey around my chin, but I find with finishing powders that is kind of just how they tend to look because they're a little bit more thicker. But what I really like about this is it does have this really smooth look to it. Even as you layer it, it doesn't get too cakey upon building on itself. So compared to my other finishing powders, that is definitely a unique feature. It is true to that super smoothing effect. Now for me, especially when I begin to layer this, it's just a little bit too dark for me. Especially in daylight, I did just notice it was a little bit more yellow and a little bit too dark, which is so disappointing. I wish they just made like a lighter shade than this because it does have a little bit of coverage to it, and if you intend to use it how they kind of made it to be used as retouching throughout the day and layering it, then it might just be too dark for you if you are as fair as me. Other than that, if you don't have that issue with shades, I think this is a really beautiful finishing powder if you feel like you do need one and like this type of formula that's super smoothing and pore blurring. And it did a moderate job at controlling oil. A little bit of oil broke through. So it's just a really beautiful powder. I would say if you have like normal to drier skin, maybe if you're not super oily. So overall, I think this is a nice new launch. It just did disappoint me with this shade being too... sorry about the noise. With this shade being too dark, like, I don't know. It's just like that is the lightest shade. There should be some lighter ones. I'm also curious if that may be the case with the deeper end of the shade range, maybe being too light for some people. I honestly wish I could use it more, but I'm probably just not going to reach for this because I don't want to alter the shade of my foundation too much. I hope you found this review of the new Rare Beauty powder helpful, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. I gotta go now, but thank you for watching. I'll put another video on the screen here so we can keep hanging out. I'll see you over there. Bye.